afternoon, and welcome to the December 13th work session, our final work session of 2017. Wow, I've made it through a whole year. So.
Not yet.
Almost. I've almost made it through a whole year. We'll see at the end how it goes. So, for our first order of business, Manager?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I'll just turn over to Sarah and Denny to take us through this presentation.
Good afternoon. It's always great to be here the last meeting of the year, especially when we have, we're talking about the downtown riverfront. I think it's an exciting opportunity, so it's really good to be here. It's been a while since we've talked about the downtown riverfront project. That doesn't mean nothing's been going on. There's been a lot of work. Sarah and I have been kind of co-leading this project, but there's a whole team of folks that have been engaged in a lot of detail work, technical work to get this project ready for future development. So we're going to talk about that today and just kind of give you an update of where we are. I think at every meeting that I've been at to talk about the downtown riverfront, I've always included this image, and I think I'll continue to include it until we take those arrows down. It really represents kind of how far we've come, but it also represents the challenges that we still have ahead of us to return our downtown to the river. And this is currently how our city meets the river. And so our hope and maybe a goal for today is to, along with us, kind of get a perception that maybe we've jumped over the fence and we're kind of trespassing into the realm of possibility. So that's our goal for today. So we're going to talk about several things. One is we want to kind of give you an update of where we are on the acquisition of the riverfront property from eWeb. We'll talk about how we've been doing with our development partner, Williams and Dame. We also want to give you some updates on some key project elements that will be really critical to the success of this project, things like the quiet zone, street access, steam plant, etc. And then finally, we want to bring you up to date on what we probably consider the crown jewel of the project, which is our riverfront park. Today, we're going to kind of provide a broad overview, and our hope is that we would have a follow-up work session early next year, and possibly even bring with us our development partners, Williams and Dame, and have them share kind of their vision and their development approach and so forth. So stay tuned. So just a quick update on the eWeb property purchase. This is actually a map of the property that the Urban Renewal Agency and the city will be acquiring from eWeb. And so the outlined area in yellow is what they call the surplus property. So this is the property that we'll be acquiring, the Urban Renewal Agency will be acquiring. If you recall, we signed a purchase and sale agreement in April. The yellow area is approximately 16.6 acres. We have an agreed purchase price of $5.75 million. And as you can see, it does not include the admin building and some parking in front of the admin building. Along with that, the green area there is the parkland property that we would purchase from eWeb, and in that case, the city would be purchasing that from eWeb, and that is really a separate agreement that came before our purchase and sale agreement for the surplus property. It's an MOU we have with eWeb. It's approximately 3 acres. The agreement is that property would be transferred to the city for $1. Part of that agreement is that eWeb would set aside $500,000 for future maintenance and security for the park, which is intended to cover about 10 years of security and maintenance. But also part of our purchase and sale agreement, there's an additional $250,000 that would be also set aside for security and maintenance of that park after it's built. So in total, it's $750,000 that have been allocated by eWeb for that purpose. Our part of the agreement on the park property is that we would allocate $3 million, a minimum of $3 million to actually build the park, and I think that's already been accomplished. I want to point the two parcels north of 4th Avenue there at the top of the site. You see those two small parcels. I sent out some information within the last week or two. Those properties actually aren't in our riverfront urban renewal boundary. And so we will be coming back to you early next year to ask the Urban Renewal Agency to consider a boundary amendment that would include those two properties so that the Urban Renewal Agency can also purchase those properties. They're part of the surplus property. I think it was always our intent in our agreement with EWEB that that would be included in the purchase. We'll have more information forthcoming on that, but again, that would happen probably in January. Since the purchase and sale agreement has been signed, there's a lot of things we've been working on, things like that are conditions to closing, things like lot line adjustments. We need to basically do lot line adjustments to decipher the property purchased by the Urban Renewal Agency, this property purchased by the city, the property be retained by EWEB. We've been working on access easements with EWEB so that they retain access to their facilities. Utility easements, there's kind of a web of utilities on the property, so we've been working a lot on what will remain, what will be removed, what might need to be relocated in the future. Highly technical work. You recall we've also talked a lot about environmental issues on the site. It's part of where we spent a lot of time with EWEB on negotiating kind of the environmental issues around the site. One of the conditions of closing was that EWEB obtain a no further action letter from DEQ, and we're happy to say that that is done. That letter actually got issued last week, so that's really good news. And basically what it means is that DEQ will not require any additional remedial action based on the knowledge and the site conditions that existed at the time that they issued the NFA. So I think it's a very positive step. We've also been working on something called a prospective purchaser agreement, and I believe we've had this conversation at the council table before, but this came about kind of part of our due diligence and our NFA work with DEQ. It's basically a legally binding agreement between a prospective purchaser, in that case the Urban Renewal Agency, and DEQ, which limits the purchaser's liability to DEQ for environmental cleanup of the property. So it's just another layer of protection that we would have, and that ultimately we could pass on to a buyer when we sold the property. So it kind of adds value to the property and the opportunity there. That has to be negotiated before we close. So one of the reasons we haven't closed yet is we're waiting for that prospective purchaser agreement to be finalized. So it's kind of the last item on the checklist before we close. We've also been working on a lot of other infrastructure issues adjacent to the site, on the site, and Sarah will talk about a few of those. So we're also making good progress with Portland-based Williams and Dame. They are the prospective purchaser developer of this site. I would say that they're active, they're fully engaged. Their interest continues to be very high at this point. We've been working a lot with them. If you recall, in 2014, EWEB issued an RFQ, and they were seeking qualified firms capable of redeveloping the site consistent with the EWEB Riverfront Master Plan. We partnered with EWEB, reviewing those RFQ responses. Ultimately, if you remember, the board selected the U of O Foundation, but ultimately they backed out of the transaction. So EWEB subsequently reached out to other qualified responders, and their board provided direction to move forward with Williams and Dame.
Which one is which?
Homer is on the left. Homer Williams and Dyke Dame is on the right. So with Williams and Dame attached to the property, we began negotiating the purchase of the property from EWEB. Again, if you remember, it wasn't part of our original plan. We were going to act as EWEB's agent, and then we kind of changed course, and felt it was in everyone's best interest for us to purchase the property. And so during that time, really Williams and Dame has waited very patiently, because it took us quite a bit of time to get through that. But soon after we signed the purchase and sale agreement with EWEB, we entered into an exclusive negotiation agreement with Williams and Dame, and that was signed in June. And basically it just says that we won't negotiate with other parties during that negotiation period. It includes all of the property with the exception of the steam plant, and it was a mutual agreement that we felt that that was unique enough that we would kind of pull it out of its exclusive and kind of be more open to different ideas for that particular building. So the exclusive negotiation agreement is for 6 months. It has a provision for a 3-month extension, particularly when we haven't closed on the property yet, which we haven't. So we're just starting that extension period, 3-month extension period with them. They're doing their due diligence. I think the path we're on is if we're both satisfied with progress, that we would move towards a detailed disposition and a development agreement, but we're not there yet. So just a quick reintroduction to Williams and Dame. Again, they're Portland-based. I think they're best known as one of the pioneering developers in the Pearl District and also in the South waterfront area in Portland. They've also developed in Bend, in Los Angeles. They've done several Pearl District projects. A lot of them include housing, rental housing, ownership housing, affordable housing. They've done housing and developments in different scales: row housing, mid-rise, high-rise, mixed use. More recently, they developed hotels, and they also have an office building under construction currently in the Pearl District. I think one of the things that's attractive about Williams and Dame is the success that they've had with complicated sites. Industrial areas, brownfields. They've turned distressed areas into viable mixed-use neighborhoods. And I think that's kind of the primary objective of our riverfront master plan, is take this area and turn it into a viable neighborhood. They have a reputation of being highly skilled horizontal developer, and I think we found them to be that. And that just means they can take a complex area and figure out and envision the layout of that site, the roads, the parcel sizes, the mix of uses, and all of those things. And so those are some of the things that they've been working on. They've recently added Portland-based Sarah Architects, and it's been a lot of fun. Every time Sarah comes up, we confuse Sarah with Sarah, but we'll get through that. But they bring a lot of skill and experience. They're a key team member because they'll ultimately be kind of helping with the vertical development, the buildings as they come out of the ground and be designed and so forth. I think the other thing that's very relevant is their experience with complicated riverfront sites, and the South Waterfront is probably the best example. And that also included a park development. So we've looked at this park. We've gone up there. I think our park staff has gone up there. I think there's definitely some relevance in their experience in this project as example. We also just have some examples of other projects. We've looked at some of these projects. We've gone up to Portland. These are some of their projects. We've also looked at projects that may even not be theirs, but that might be good representative kind of examples of, scale and design and things that might be relevant for Eugene and our market and so forth. So I'm going to pass this on to Sarah and have her finish.
I'm Sarah Maderi, Interim Public Works Director, and the team is referring to me as Maderi now, which is kind of back to my high school days, but it's super confusing when they call me Sarah. So I'm going to talk a little bit about just the early concepts that are emerging out of this project with this team, and want to start with this picture and maybe just reground ourselves in our talking about the Willamette River, because this has really been at the core of everything that the community's had hopes for, that we've had hopes for. It doesn't matter whether what you're hoping for is to have a glass of wine or a beer at the river, or if you want to run, bike, walk, work, live. This is really the reason why this project has the most excitement. So, as a landscape architect, I know that almost every great design I've ever seen starts with a pretty compelling concept diagram. And this is a early concept coming from the Williams and Dame team that tells a lot. So there's a lot going on in this, and I'm just going to walk through to kind of just orient you to the things they're thinking about. So first I want to talk about the great streets. The downtown plan really identified 5th Street and 8th Street as being a great street, and we've been talking to you about the need to connect from Willamette to Willamette. So we've been talking about that mostly in terms of 8th Street and what we're doing on that road, just so you can really connect from downtown to the river. That's shown sorry about the back of your head, John, but that's like this connection right here. And I'm going to talk to you more about the quiet zone and the crossing in a minute. But what's emerging out of their plan and early thoughts is really this 5th Street connection all the way to the river, which is new and different. Right now, the road, as you know, kind of jogs over and goes like this. But 5th Street's right-of-way actually goes all the way through. And this holds an opportunity to not just connect Willamette to Willamette, but it actually connects the Whitaker to Willamette. So you have two very popular areas, the Whitaker, 5th Street, and then going to the river. At the end of this, you'll see kind of this pretty exciting looking arc. And one of the concepts they're talking about is adding an additional pedestrian bridge and connection across the park so that you really have the ability for both sides of the river to be with this park. And there's concern a little bit about the Ferry Street connection, and the team can talk to you about this more in January. But the idea is that when you're coming down 5th Street, you might see this really exciting kind of art and infrastructure piece that is the end of where the bridge is, but the bridge is actually a little bit farther upstream. You'll also see that by doing this 5th Street connection, it also starts to reestablish a more regular block pattern, which is much easier to redevelop and much more like what we are used to seeing in our urban fabric. And then I would also want to point to the park. So we showed you that slide that shows what we're getting transferred from eWeb. What you'll start to see in their ideas is actually expanding that green space into the site much more than what we are purchasing. And if you're really wanting to have a beer on the river, we're starting to look at this area as being where this green area comes in, that there's some sort of restaurant row. I don't know how that will actually transform in real life, but that's kind of what we're starting to look at. And then also a couple of anchors on the site. Just like any good story has a really compelling beginning and middle and ending, the developers actually, our property is really all about the middle of the site, and there's two key beginnings and endings, the headquarters building and the steam plant, that are going to be really critical for how people in this community experience this site. And the last thing I want to say is, as we talk about this project, and I look at it and I look at it up close and I look at it far back, it's an exciting edge, but with some of the things they're showing here, it's also an exciting center to our community, and I think that's been brought up at this table before. This is really not just an edge, it's the middle. All right. So the team has also started to take a stab at what the look and feel of the site might be, and this sketch could be any of the street corridors, could be 5th Street, and what's exciting is they're starting to translate, okay, how do you take the ideas of having a neighborhood, how do you take the vibe, kind of that design and 5th Street vibe, and translate it into the site, and also reflect the industrial nature of the steam plant and the history of the site. And so you'll see here a look at some patterns and shapes and colors that feel like they kind of match those two things together. And it's also at a kind of Eugene neighborhood scale. They're looking at 4- and 5-story buildings and something that would be very, very walkable. I forgot to mention that on that 5th Street connection, they're imagining that if the road goes through, that actually at some point it's mostly pedestrian and bicycles. If you're in there, cars could get around, but it's more of a ped bike connection. So as Denny mentioned, we've been also just trying to look at actual real buildings on the ground to see how would they look at it. And so these are examples of potentially what some smaller, do you want us to close that blind behind you? I think we could probably do that.
Actually, we're all right. We're
Yeah.
halfway, yeah.
Okay.
That'd be great.
One of the housing types that could emerge on the site would be more of a townhome condominium. And so we've been looking at some to just get a sense of what that would feel like. And we've also been looking at some larger buildings that they've built or that others have built that might be kind of hotel, apartment, housing type scale. And then I want to talk about the steam plant. So this image of the steam plant was actually taken from my drift boat, which is maybe one of the best views of the site of the river. And when you look at it like this, you start to realize this is a really very exciting place. In fact, this could be the most awesome place to be in Eugene. And I think about it's one of the few places on the site and in our city where it has our history and our future together. And as I was thinking about it, it's actually our legacy because we will collectively make a decision about what's going to happen with this over the next few years. The challenges with this site, UWeb's done a great job of going through and kind of harvesting out a lot of the really historic collectible treasures, and I think we've shared some of those with you before, and we certainly will do more of that in the future. But there's still a lot left in this building. As you can, it's not like, doesn't look like it would be really easy to just change the use when you're looking at pictures like this or even like this. There's a lot of openness, but there's also a lot of metal and things that'll be done to get it seismically safe and to be able to have a kind of community gathering space. But the promise is pretty spectacular. There will not be another view like this in the world where you can be inside right on the river. We'll never have anything closer. And if you even allow people to get up onto the roof, you'll never have a better view of the Willamette River anywhere, I think, than you will right here. So here we go. We're going to go back kind of more into a project mode. And I just want to mention we have a fabulous team of people behind us that have all been working on different elements of this. And it's a great example of when our organization across every department comes together to try to realize a vision that you and the community have. They're here to answer more specific questions. But you've been talking about the Railroad Quiet Zone for a little while. And the last time I think we were here, we were talking about 10 different crossings, and we were talking about it in a matter of potentially 2 phases, because one of the things we had learned is that because of the distance between this crossing and these crossings, we can actually approach them as 2 different projects, which allows us to be able to kind of fund it incrementally instead of having to take on the big project all at once. So the last time we were here, we had talked about these 3 potentially being the first phase, and also talking about the possibility of whether or not we would be able to expand the urban renewal district to be able to fund all 3 of these as part of the first phase. As part of the work you did with the Riverfront Urban Renewal District, you did identify, or the agency determined that we would have the advisory team, which we've been calling the River Guides. That team actually met as recently as yesterday to talk about this and to make a recommendation. And it appears they're making a recommendation, or will be making a recommendation to expand to include that. And we'll be coming back. You'll get to make a decision about that. So we'll present more of that information in January so you can decide that. I'm going to toggle back and forth between the plan views and the pictures just so you know where we're talking about. So the railroad, comes along through this area right here. And so those are the crossings we're talking about. I'm about to talk about this one right here as I move into this discussion. So one of the things we've identified is that through our work with the railroad and with ODOT is that we can use a roundabout as being an additional safety measure to meet some of the requirements and bring in a multimodal entry into the site. So you remember previously when we were kind of doing this 8th Street before, that was going to turn and kind of come in here. What we're looking at now is coming this way directly into the site and having a roundabout, which really pulls in 8th Street just like the 5th Street connection will pull in. Want to take a moment to talk about one of the challenges. So there's a lot of opportunity here. There's also some challenges that we're going to need to explore and analyze. As I mentioned, it's going to be a big, heavy lift to do this project. One of the other challenges as I start to talk about 5th Street that you'll note is that the Bow Trust building is squarely in that right-of-way zone. So we're going to have to make some decisions about how important is it to make that connection to the river and create those blocks, and how will we either repurpose the Bow Trust building, use elements of the Bow Trust building, or not have the Bow Trust building on site.
Would you identify that?
It's this one right here.
Oh, that one. Okay.
Yeah. So this is the 5th Street kind of connection to the river, right? I'm right. We've identified issues with this all along, but I just, we don't want there to be any surprises as people start to make and draw lines that that's going to be something that we explore with you. All right. And then the last thing we want to talk about is the Riverfront Park. Denny shared a lot. This, I think, from the community perspective, This is, when people talk about wanting to have a beer on the river, I interpret that to mean people just want to be able to get there and experience it and hang out there and feel like it's their river. And the park is really, I think, the key of where that's going to happen. We know we want it to be a world-class community asset. It's going to be our very first kind of urban riverfront park where our downtown meets the river. And we have an opportunity while doing that to also repair this path that many of you have probably walked along. So an update on where we're at with that, and I'm going to just leave it on this site because it's more fun to look at. We have been working to bring on a design team to work with us and with the development team on how we're going to do that. So we issued first a request for qualifications, looking for who was even qualified to do this work. We've been looking for a team that has exceptional technical expertise, somebody that has a strong public involvement background and really strong communications. We're also looking for outstanding design capabilities and somebody that has some downtown kind of riverfront work. So we did a request for qualifications, and from that we've issued a request for proposals to 5 teams. Those 5 teams are, 3 of them are from the Portland area, so they're Oregon teams, Walker Macy, Mayor Reed, and Place. One of those teams has a Eugene base, so it's Denver-based Civitas and Cameron McCarthy from Eugene. And then one is a DC-based firm, Lab and Martha Schwartz. That will be going through what we're hoping they'll help us with is some site analysis, permitting analysis, public involvement strategies, and ability to work with the development team. We'll be selecting that group in January, so when we come back with another update on what's happening in January, we can tell you how we've proceeded with that. When our goal is to have the park available so that it's part of people's 2021 river experience. We know people are going to be going up and down our riverfront. It would be a great place for people and for the community to gather, and we could all feel really good about that. We do have a video of that, of the park development piece, and that's how we're going to end, and then we'll open it for questions.
Eugene's outstanding, much-loved park system is set to get a significant addition. The City of Eugene's recent purchase of the 16-acre eWeb riverfront property for redevelopment includes space for a 3-acre park and additional open space, all expected to be completed before the world looks to Eugene during the 2021 IAAF World Track and Field Championships.
This place will be unlike any other space we have along the riverfront. Riverfront revitalization is a huge economic boom for communities and enhancing prosperity. It's going to make this a more attractive place for people to come and visit. It's going to be an opportunity for us to both reconnect with the river as well as give people an opportunity to come down here and actively experience this space.
One of the things that we heard most clearly in talking to over 10,000 people was that they wanted more access to the river. They wanted to be able to see the river, float the river, swim safely in the river, and really connect to it. Preserving the natural environment is vital to the health of the river, and it's a deeply held value in our community. So we'll be looking forward to both enhancing the health of the riverbank and making that conservation value both visible and tangible to the public as we do this more urban riverfront.
The park and the entire riverfront redevelopment project will reinforce Eugene's history by reconnecting the river to downtown.
This space is all about making connections up and down the river, across the river, to the university, into downtown, and making connections in ways that we can't even imagine right now. I believe that this space, when it gets revitalized, is going to make Eugene a better place to live, work, and play.
From the beginning, we've really envisioned both sides of the river as sort of a bigger, central urban park experience. We really see that from the eWeb Riverfront site, you could see across to Alton Baker, see a variety of potentially boating or swimming, and that those would be seen as experiences that are tied together and easily accessible across this Peter DeFazio pedestrian and bicycle bridge. We'll use this property to greatly enhance visibility of the river and improve enjoyment of our beautiful natural resource.
The park's vision and improvement, some of the important aspects of the riverfront redevelopment that will better connect Eugene and its green spaces, will help the city thrive for decades to come, drawing people from near and far to the center of Eugene and providing a lasting legacy for the entire community.
Nice having a former newscaster.
Hey, how did you know?
All right, thank you very much. So, anybody need to be in the queue? Alan? Anyone else? Claire?
Yes, please.
I was waiting for you. I don't know what took you so long. Betty?
I was waiting for Betty.
You missed?
I was waiting for Betty.
All right, thank you very much. I'll let Alan,
Unless Betty wants to go first.
lead it off. Go for it.
A question about the park and the Willamette Greenway, the law that protects the riverfront, and how we're addressing that, and what is the buffer there? Sometimes it's different in different places, so maybe someone can address that and how that would interact with the development and what William Dames.
Good afternoon. Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. I'm Emily Proudfoot. I'm the project manager for the eWeb Riverfront Park project, piece of the project. And most of that Willamette Greenway work was done through the land use process that was associated with the master plan work. So the whole, anything that was park is also, the same line as the park is the same line as the Willamette Greenway setbacks. So all of that, those land use pieces have been addressed through the code development that was done for the special district work. The project. It varies. There is a minimum, I think, 100-foot setback, but I don't quote me. I'll have to get back to you. But it's a good setback, and it gives quite a bit of depth, but it varies. So obviously, like right by the steam plant, it's really narrow, right? But where it opens up further, it's several hundred feet back, and I think the Willamette Greenway line mimics the park property line.
Maybe you could describe the purpose of the Willamette Greenway and what's it intended to do.
Sure. So through our state land use laws, there were some specific goals around protection, but also access to the Willamette River. And so anytime you want to do development along the river, you need a Willamette River Greenway permit. Often that permit shows, whatever developments you're planning on doing within the Willamette River Greenway setback, and those uses are often permitted through a land use process locally. So we have a Willamette River Greenway permit for all of our riverfront parks, and if we want to make changes to those master plans, that's a land use action. So we tried to codify that, or we did codify that, so both for protection and providing access for people in the appropriate manners along the Willamette River per state law.
One of the concerns, of course, is runoff into the river directly. Well, how would we address that?
Sure. So all of our, development now is required to have stormwater treatment prior to entering our stormwater system. So, and that was a fundamental value that was shared and expressed in the master plan. So you'll see a ton of stormwater treatment and green streets and those kinds of design ethics built into the system. So anything that's paved, anything that comes off an impervious surface or a building has to be pre-treated before it enters the river. And it can't, also the volume of the flow also has to be controlled. So often our stormwater treatment facilities accomplish both of those goals by slowing flow and pre-treatment.
And what about the pesticide insecticides that are on the vegetation areas right at the river?
Well, we definitely, in Parks and Open Space, we have a really low level of pesticide use in general. Many of our parks are pesticide free, and we're very, very careful about how we use pesticides. So I think, I can't remember if the master plan specifically addressed that, but there were a ton of native plants, and there's really a native plant ethic that is expressed as well in the master plan, and we're trying to bring those sort of open space design and criteria forward into the open space planning of the whole district, not just the park. So it's a really important value that we've heard and we want to bring forward.
Stay there, Emily. This is in my Ward 3, as is the Riverfront Research Park in Ward 3. And I was just meeting the other day with Chris Edwards and Mike Harwood from the U of O about their coming up conditional use permit for the Riverfront Research Park development. And we're specifically talking about the area north of the railroad tracks to the river and the ball fields and how that would all work. And one of the ideas I was talking to them about is connecting these two things, this development with that development, because they actually abut right down there. Have you guys thought about that? And I encourage them to talk to you guys about that and how that might flow better and have it be more of a seamless entryway or seamless connection between the two pieces.
Yeah, we've been at the table. They're going through they've been engaging a variety of public entities as well as neighbors and special uses, cyclists and river boaters, and in their conditional use permit, to get ready for the conditional use permit that they are going to apply for as part of the development of that North Campus area. So we've been at the table, and we've really been encouraging a closer look at that West End and how those connect, and really what can happen that makes it really special. And I just don't think they're quite at that level of detail yet, but we're certainly at the table, and we've been really encouraging more conversation around how that looks and how it feels and how we can really make it kind of a vital entrance to both sides.
Yeah, and one of the ideas is to potentially take the soccer field, and turn it into a turf, which would not make it grass anymore, but then people were worried about the runoffs. That can be handled with swales and things like that before it enters the river.
Absolutely.
Very effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a fundamental component of, any design work that they do there, particularly its adjacency to the river. And, it's something that community values so much through a lot of our conservation ethics. I think it's, the visibility of that kind of design is really important. We can't just stick it underground maybe in a swirler. So I think it can also be a really wonderful piece of any open space design that we do into the future. I think it really speaks to really good urban design. So I'm looking forward to those kinds of conversations and details.
And you're not retiring anytime soon, so you can make sure.
No, I'm not. And I'm very excited to be on the project, so thank you.
Next question is about Williams and Dame. And where exactly are we with that negotiations? Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? And are they excited about this project? And is it just a little bit more time, a couple more I's to dot and T's to cross to get to the point where we're in development agreement with them?
Yeah, I think that's actually a pretty frequent question because they haven't been highly visible. I think you can see kind of where they spent most of their time. It's on the horizontal at this point, so there's not a lot of pretty pictures of things that have come forward at this point. I think our intent is to make sure we are comfortable and they are comfortable with, a site plan. What's the mix of uses? What is the scale? All of those things before we dive too deeply into negotiating. And when we're talking about negotiating, it's who pays for what's and streets and all those things that are going to come up. So we haven't spent too much time talking about those deal points yet because we need to get comfortable and we need council to get comfortable what we're investing in. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it. So my comment about we're not quite there yet and we're not quite ready to just dive into deal points is because and they've been very receptive. They are highly engaged. They're spending a lot of time. They have a good team. My sense is they really want to do this project. They've stuck with us for 2 or 3 years while we've gone through all of this. And so although they haven't been highly visible, I think they're very engaged. And I think as we start to move forward with some design concepts and you get to start seeing some of those hopefully in the near future, then we would start to talk more about those deal points and what's in an agreement and all those kind of complicated things. So we still have a lot of work to do.
So, yeah, I agree. And it's a very unique opportunity for them. I would suspect they'd be excited about it. The idea was that we would buy the property from eWeb. Would then we turn it around and sell it to Williams and Dame with a development agreement, or would we still retain the property? Or is that still a negotiation?
Well, all of that can be negotiated. I don't think our intent when we purchased was to be the long-term owner of this property. So I think there is an expectation that we would sell property either to Williams and Dame, or, if that doesn't work out, we can't reach an agreement, then we would move in another direction. But I don't think our intent is long-term ownership at this point. But.
And maybe a little bit more about the steam plant. Is there a development concept around that, Ed, or how are we going to approach the development of that?
Yeah, well, the steam plant's actually not part of the property that that's part that we maintained ownership of. So when we went into the exclusive negotiating agreement with Williams and Dame, we held that piece out. There's different people in the community that are talking about possibilities. We have not gone very far other than to try to generate some excitement. And as we've started to learn more about what it's going to be like for somebody to actually develop this site, we've become more aware of how not only important it is. I mean, it's a great opportunity, but it's also just really important because it's one of the things that will pull people in, and people are going to want to have access into that space. So we haven't done a lot of work on it, but we are starting to gear up to that.
After the William Dame stuff goes on.
Yeah.
Is that included in the NFA, the no further action letter?
It's the entire site.
Yeah.
All the way down to 8th?
Yes. It ends at the steam plant, basically, yes.
On the other side of the steam plant. So including the steam plant.
Yeah.
Anything
it ends down.
Yeah.
Oh, this is off already.
The little.
Yeah.
Actually, I could probably just go back to that too.
Jump up there and point at it.
Yeah, it ends down here.
Oh, okay.
Right. This is
No,
like right here
no,
is
the property actually ends at the end of the steam plant, that little alley right there. Yes.
Oh, right, because they're keeping that piece. Okay.
Yeah, that's the utility,
Yeah.
the transfer
That's the EWEB.
substation.
And then the university ownership starts here.
That's
right?
actually
Yeah.
the highly contaminated site,
Yeah.
is that
Yeah.
dark brown patch
Yeah,
there. that
pointing to the
EWEB will
green, but
retain,
this is
yeah.
kind of, yeah.
That's U of O. Okay.
Okay, Claire?
Thank you. Well, thank you. Thanks for this update. Very exciting. Wish we did have an inked deal with William and Dane, but understand why we're proceeding the way we are. So I had a couple of questions, but first I just wanted to address the issue of the quiet zone. Now it sounds like we have 3 phases for the quiet zone. So I just want to remind us that this council made a commitment to those 10 crossings as phase 1, and then additional crossings further north of the tracks as phase 2. And I have a real concern that we're moving towards a situation where we're going to fund and build these 3 crossings, create this mini quiet zone at the EWEB site, and then the remaining 7 of phase 1 will never be built because we don't have a commitment to finding the funds. So I'm going to be looking for more specifics from the city manager about how those other 7 crossings will be funded before I'm ready to approve using urban renewal for the one in the district. This is an issue of equity. If we fund a quiet zone for the development of future households along the river and don't make a similar effort to address the noise for already existing residents, we are creating further inequity, something that we do not want to tarnish this project with. So I think it's really important. I understand we can't secure funding for those 7 crossings right away, but we can identify the strategies for how we're going to build that funding, and I think that's absolutely doable, and I want to see a commitment to that. On the other aspects there, I think a couple of the new pieces that were mentioned, the idea of a pedestrian bike bridge over to Alton Baker, I think that's a really exciting idea that we hadn't seen, that I don't know had been explored in the master plan development or not, but I think that's something we should look at. And also this idea of extending Fifth to the river. Understand that's a complicated question, but I think it's definitely one that we should give some serious consideration to. So I look forward to digging into that a little bit more. And then I had questions about the parkland. So in this presentation, we just looked strictly along kind of the bike path parkland, but in the master plan, there was identified additional land for at least one small park. And so I'm wondering what the status of that piece is.
Yes. Do we have I think that's actually at the very end.
There is a master plan.
Yeah. Let me just go. gets to the steam plant and it wants to stop and have you guys talk about it some more. Yeah, so I think what the team has been just exploring is, and when I say team, I'm talking about for the most part, the Williams development team. They're exploring different ways in which this could work. And so as you can see from here, they're not showing the park down in this spot. They're looking at this area potentially by the steam plant and next to the river is potentially a potentially low-income housing site possibility. So the park, they're looking at maybe expanding the park in a slightly different location. And that's all still very conceptual.
Yeah, so in this version, it's right near 8th, which on the previous map you said was where the worst. You can kind of see just the edge of it, that circle.
Yeah, well, so what happened in this circle here, and if Mark may want to correct me, but when we looked at this, we were talking about this being a pretty contaminated area, and so we were not going to build in that area. We can't build in that area, and so it was going to kind of be a green space. The idea that came out is we could also use that as an area where we do a roundabout. So it's not green, but it allows us to move that crossing down. And the developers talked about how do you then also have that be kind of a connection to the river with some amount of green at the end of the roundabout.
So I just want to make sure that we're looking back at that master plan, which, you know, we were told would govern the development of the site, and that if there are things that get adjusted and we're losing some green space over here, that we need to find another place to make that up, because I think it's an important part of the overall project.
Totally agree.
Thank you.
Okay, Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I agree with everything Claire just said entirely, up to and including the issues around being reticent with funding until we see all of the quiet zone stuff. And for me, it seems like we should talk about that in 3 phases. Maybe the one that we'll talk about once we have a funding plan for phases 2, which are the other parts of the downtown, and phase 3, which is West Eugene, which deserves, West and Northwest Eugene, that deserve a quiet zone just every bit as much as this area does. Wonderful presentation that's entitled The Downtown Riverfront. And I counted, actually did hash marks, that you referred to the downtown riverfront 6 times during the beginning of that presentation. Now, I've always been of the opinion that the riverfront is part of our downtown. So I'm really happy to hear us retooling in on the focus that our riverfront is our downtown. As a matter of fact, you said, unless I heard you wrong, that this is an opportunity to take our long-held plans for reconnecting to the riverfront forward, that it's the real center of downtown, that it reconnects the river to downtown, that it's the true center of Eugene. And Sarah, when you said that it's truly a great place for the community to gather, I have to tell you, I couldn't agree more. I'd love to hear more about the 10,000 people who said they'd like more access to the river. That was a very brief mention, but that sounded like a fairly significant bit of public input there, and I'd really like a lot more detail.
We presented that information when we've been bringing you the community outreach efforts that we did around the Parks and Recreation System Plan. The surveys that we've done and the information we brought back indicated that that was a really high level. We can send you the information and share that with you.
I'd like as many details as you'll send me. It's not surprising to me at all to hear that.
It did say it was the center of the city, core of the city, not downtown. Just that's what I meant.
That's a little semantical, but I think you got my point. The other piece too that I wondered about was how will we pay for maintaining this park?
So this is Denny mentioned in the first part that as part of the transfer and agreement with EWEB, they're also agreeing to fund a certain level of park operations funding for at least up to 10 years, I think is the number. Yeah.
A certain percentage?
Well, it's built in. Do you have the numbers right there with you? Because you presented them earlier.
Yeah, it's $500,000 in the MOU that we have to transfer the park, and then it's another $250 in the purchase and sale agreement we have with the Urban Renewal Agency. So in total, it's $750,000.
Which is roughly what percentage of what it'll cost to operate and maintain that park?
We don't know the exact number on that until we have the park design, but we anticipated it was at least a 10-year number.
One of the reasons I asked that question, obviously, is because we've had a lot of conversations, and Sarah's been working very, very hard, especially with neighbors and with Councilor Ye and I on the Stryker Field Park project, and how we've talked about we're not moving ahead with building and developing any parks until we have the money to maintain them. But it sounds like we don't have complete funding to maintain this one yet.
What I would say, when Roger Gray, the then general manager of EWEB, and I negotiated the deal, at the time the intent of the original $500,000 would pay for 10 years worth of maintenance based on cost estimates that we had at the time.
Okay, and I agree with doing it. I'm absolutely in favor of doing it and moving forward. The other piece was I was so happy to hear was the fairly massive, I think, increase in access to the riverfront that'll be created from both of those projects. That's been a conversation piece at this table a number of times about the limited access to EWEB. So I'm glad we'll never have to say that again down here, because we're going to fix that.
Okay. Emily.
Thank you. I have to watch out for that green along the river. I'm worried about it. We have the coastline protected in this state, and once you build on the river, it's built. I realize we've already decided that, but it's a big concern of mine, and I'll be looking carefully at the plans to see how much green there really is. 100 feet's a third of a football field. It's not that huge for a minimum setback. Will we still own the riverfront after somebody else buys the development?
We'll own the riverfront park.
So the green strip along the whole river?
That's what we're contemplating, but I mean, that's still up for negotiation.
Well, I hope we keep it.
Yeah, we'll definitely be keeping the park.
Who owns the rest of the riverfront? Does the U of O own part of it? Do we own the whole riverfront along the whole river?
The ownership on the riverfront through the entire city of Eugene is speckled with a lot of property owners. The city owns a lot of riverfront parkland. University owns that piece that goes through their property. There's some property along the river that's owned by the rail. There's private property owners, like Valley River Center owns the land. I mean, it really varies.
Do they all have that minimum 100-foot setback?
Yeah, the Willamette River Greenway applies to the whole.
Okay, wonderful. The low-income housing that's being planned, I'm a little skeptical. Living down by the river would be very attractive, and in other cities, those areas tend to really start to be owned by rich people. So how would we protect that as a mixed income area?
That's one of the items that we will need to work through. We've just been expressing an interest in seeing a mix of types of uses that would include that.
Thank you. How are the river guides connected to all this planning?
Yeah. Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, as part of the Riverfront Urban Renewal Plan, the plan requires that we create, you included that in the plan, the Urban Renewal Agency, to have an advisory committee. We call them the River Guides. And so they play a role in reviewing investments that the Urban Renewal Agency would be making within the Riverfront District. So we just went through a process. The mayor nominated and council approved the River Guides, and so they're now in place, and they'll be advisory to the agency director, which is the city manager.
So what exactly is their job in this besides financial transactions? How much input are they having into how the design actually works out? I
wouldn't see them as a design review. I think their role is to look at the investments, and we consider all these urban renewal expenditures as investments. So the investments that we make and assuring that those are prudent and the community gets an adequate return on that investment. And that could be in the forms of, open space and jobs and housing and all those things. So they'll work through those kinds of issues. I don't think they weren't selected because of their design expertise, so I don't think that would be the primary role for this group.
And if someone else is going to buy it, but we're going to design it. Do you need to keep the potential buyers in the loop so that it still has attractiveness to them to buy? I mean, is it just speculation on our part? Or if I knew I was going to sell it, I would want some input from the potential buyers to make sure I was building something they wanted to buy.
Are you talking about the park in particular?
No, I'm talking about the other part where the buildings will be the shops and the apartments and the beer drinking.
I'll try to answer that. I think our intent is to sell the property when we have all of those details figured out. So we're not inclined to sell it without having a pretty detailed development agreement that really sets all the expectations about what will be built, the design review process associated when things are built. Those are all complicated kind of elements that we would put into an agreement as we're selling the property. So I think we're going to spend a lot of time trying to nail down what all those expectations are so that we see an investment and we define what the return on that investment is, and we provide assurances that we're going to get there.
And what happens if after they own it, they do something else?
Historically, we've dealt with that in the agreements that are signed. There are clawback provisions. There's all kinds of things and we're not there yet, so I can't answer how we're going to deal with it because we're not negotiating deal points at this point, but we will get there. We will absolutely have to get there because we have to get it right.
I just want to add one element to that, and that is that the Williams and Dane team hold that concern as well. They feel very strongly that there needs to be a quality of design and use in that space in order for the whole thing to work together. So they're also talking about how do we make sure that if somebody buys this that it carries through.
And then does the buyer pay for the development, or do we develop it first and then sell it? We don't know yet.
Yeah, it's too early.
Okay. A totally different subject, the steam plant, which I really, really like. I took a long tour of it. How will that be developed? It's not the river guides. Will we pick a new set of guides? And where does that fall into this development? Is it we wait for this first, or is it going to start before it's over?
They may have a parallel overlapping process. I think that the questions you're asking are all the same questions that we're starting to ask, and what our intent was today was to make sure we got here really early and that these questions hadn't already been answered before we're showing you kind of some of the things they're thinking about. I think as we get into January and February and into the first quarter of 2018, we'll be able to start filling in some more certainty on those questions. The steam plant, we know the developers have an interest in how that is developed, and they want to help support that. We know people in the community have an interest, and so we'll be working with that as part of the whole. And so there's a lot of moving parts to all of this, and it's, as you know, it's a challenge to get in front of you. So we're trying to do it early, let you know these are the spectrum of things, and then we'll bring them back, but always talk about them as one whole, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you very much. It's a lot of work. You've done a great presentation. I'm excited about it, and I guess I'm just thinking ahead about all the questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Betty.
Thank you. First, I've never understood why people say we're cut off from the river. There's a book, Camus' The Plague, I think it is, that starts with the city that turned its back on the river. In our case, it's very easy to get there in many, many different ways. From our former city hall, you could just walk up the street, you'd be at the river. When I first came to Eugene, I stayed in a motel and asked where was a place to take my bike, and they said right there. I was right by the river. And so I don't know what we mean by being cut off from the river. I think we're not cut off at all. In fact, the first time I went there, I got lost, and I asked, what's the way out? And they said, which one do you mean? There were lots of ways out. But my main concern is protecting the river, and I certainly don't think that's always been done. If you look at Valley River Inn, there was no protection of the river right there. It's a nice view from the end, but the river is right by the concrete. And I'm concerned when I see a roundabout, which is for cars, I assume, and there by the river, the more buildings, the more cars you have, the more pollution we have. And that's unavoidable, I think. If there is housing, and there's going to be housing, I would hope that we get inclusionary zoning before that, rather than having them planning for a low-income housing project. If we had inclusionary zoning, it would help prevent it from being just a place for rich people. And I'm concerned about this part. As I say, I think there are plenty of ways to get to the river, but in this case, if you have solid buildings, can people get through, or will it be just for the people who live there, like a gated community? That's a question.
Yeah, the master plan actually calls for the ability to get through, and we have been strongly communicating that, and that is also a desire. Their history shows that their developments allow for that kind of flow through.
I thought there was supposed to be, but the pictures looked as if it was solid buildings. I understand that is not the way it will be. The park land seems like a very small amount of land to me. 3 acres is not very much, and I would hope that could be increased, and that the setbacks could be increased in this area. The quiet zone I've never been sold on. I don't think it matters if you hear a train now and then, and I don't think it's worth all the money that we're talking about. Let's see, access. Is the roundabout a definite part of this plan? No.
It is, and because we're considering it as part of the railroad quiet zone crossing.
Back to the quiet zone. And
it's all part of the same, trying to make that 8th Street connection, use it as part of closing one of the zones. So it just makes a lot of sense technically.
How influential will the river guides be? 13 seconds.
Yeah.
As I recall, and I'll look at Amanda, who's leading that, is that they are advisory to the city manager or the agency director in that case, and so they'll direct the recommendations that come forward about how we spend money within the district and so forth generally. So they're not advisory to the agency board; they're advisory to the agency director.
Seems to me that's a council's job. But and anything we have about this, I would like the names of the river guides. I know I've seen them once, but I would like the names attached. Thank you.
Yes, I have 2 counselors wanting to be in the queue, and I'm just wanting to be cognizant of time. So we'll do quick, but not a long back and forth, if that's possible, because staff will be coming back with more of an update. So Mike first, then Claire.
Thank you very much, Mary. Betty, I'm happy to hear you say there's no access problems over there. You just mentioned that when we get to the specifics about infrastructure, we'll have more budgetary things when we get to the point where we're talking about what comes before the Urban Renewal District for expenditures of district funds. But I'm wondering, do you have any kind of preliminary numbers on what will be added to the current cap once you bring in the 2 parcels and the pieces around the railroad? What will be added to the current cap of spending capacity there once those 2 new parcels are added to the district?
The cap is a cap, so it doesn't get expanded. So the last time the Riverfront Urban Renewal District plan was approved, the agency board established a cap, a spending cap, of $34.8 million.
I'm not asking that question.
That's a fixed number, so it doesn't go up. The revenue could go up, but it doesn't affect how much you could spend in the district. That's a real cap, and it doesn't move.
And I asked a bad question. How much will that have an impact on revenue? Is the better question.
We don't know until we know what gets built on the site. Right now, it's tax exempt, so it generates nothing. So, it gets transferred over, the land automatically will create a little bit, and then when you build on it, it'll create a little bit. Over time. It depends on how much value you bring to the site, but they're not huge parcels. So we'll talk about that more in January, though.
Okay, thank you.
Claire?
Yes, just very briefly, I agree. I think the folks who are serving as river guides, we should at least have a list of the roster online. I did a quick search on the city's website, and the only return I got on that search was the dates that they meet. but not who's actually serving as a river guide. So I'd like to see that on the website.
Great, and thank you very much. Very interesting, informative, exciting. Look forward to having you back in the new year. So thank you so much. And we will move quickly into the next item on the agenda.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Stephanie Jennings, and I manage the Housing Opportunities team for the city. And I've been with the city about a dozen years working on affordable housing, various affordable housing efforts. This work session is a follow-up to a work session that occurred with Council in April, where we talked about the opportunities created through SB 1533. Council at that point asked staff to work with the Housing Policy Board to further investigate those opportunities, and so this is a follow-up to that, where we're presenting recommendations of the Housing Policy Board related to generating a dedicated local funding source for affordable housing through a construction excise tax. So each of you have copies of the presentation. I'll try to move through this fairly quickly just to try to make sure we have at least 10 or 15 minutes for questions and comments. But please, if I do skim over something, I'm happy to go back and talk about it further.
They're off and on again.
Okay.
Oh, that will start in just.
All right. Okay, got it. All right. So just real briefly, I will talk a little bit about the state of affordable housing funding, the need and supply of affordable housing, quickly review the requirements under SB 1533, and talk a little bit about other Oregon jurisdictions that have adopted a construction excise tax. And then we'll get into the recommendations that have been developed by the Housing Policy Board, and then leave time for questions and next steps. Just looking at our affordable housing funding, the city has received federal funds over time through two programs, the Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, and then the Home Investment Partnership Program, which is known just simply as HOME. And as you can see over time, these resources have pretty dramatically decreased. At the same time that we've seen this decrease in the resources that we really rely upon for supporting local affordable housing projects, our population is increasing, and we have seen a significant increase in the needs. We have done a little bit of analysis looking at the who lives in Eugene, what kinds of incomes they have, and what that means in terms of what they can afford. And so if you look at the different populations, roughly 42% of our population, they make under $35,000 per year. And at the low end, you know, they can only pay less than $625 per month, but up to $875 per month in rent. We have more of a middle group. You know, they definitely have more that they can afford in terms of their monthly housing costs and utility costs. And then we have a higher income group that has a lot more income that they can utilize for affordable housing. The standard that we're using for this affordability is that they're paying no more than 30% of their income for their housing and utility costs. And that's really a pretty nationally accepted standard. When we look at what kind of housing is available in Eugene, it's very clear that we have a lot of people with limited incomes that are competing for a limited number of units with those very low rents. So we see this a lot with seniors who are living on Social Security. We see this with younger families, singles, students at various income levels are all competing for that housing stock. We do see some limitations in the middle as well, and so there's been a lot of discussion about the missing middle and entry units for home buyers, and so that's definitely also a part of this analysis. I would just say that there's a huge amount of a huge number of factors that go both into demand and supply. One of the things I did before joining the city was manage a journal called Housing Policy Debate, because even among the experts, there is a lot of different perspectives about the causes and solutions when you're talking about housing issues. So for a lot of local jurisdictions, they have been thinking about how to supplement the federal resources that most receive through home and CDBG. Across the country, hundreds of state and local jurisdictions have created housing trust funds to create an ongoing dedicated source of locally controlled funding for affordable housing. Typically, these resources are used for a wide range of new production, rehabilitation, acquisition, and reconstruction. And these resources are frequently coupled with other private and public funding sources. In Oregon, our resources for such housing trust funds are very limited. And so the legislature created a new opportunity through SB 1533, which is a construction excise tax. And so this is placed on the value of the permit. So it's new construction or an expansion of living space. It's not on the value of the land. And the legislature said you can create up to a 1% CET on residential development, and then they did not specify a limitation on commercial or industrial development. They did create some parameters for how those resources could be used. And so as you're looking at this chart, there are two categories that look fairly similar. And really the difference between those is if the jurisdiction adopts inclusionary zoning, they have to reserve 50% of the revenue from this for incentives for those developments that are subject to inclusionary zoning. If the local jurisdiction does not adopt inclusionary zoning, it can be used for really any affordable housing purpose as defined by the city. 15% does go to the state for homeownership programs. Oregon Housing and Community Services has committed to return those resources to the community that they came from to support down payment assistance and other homeownership efforts. For the commercial CET, there is more flexibility. 48% of the funds are simply at the discretion of the local jurisdiction, and then another 48% is related to housing, and then up to 4% for administrative expenses. A number of local jurisdictions have taken advantage of this new opportunity, and so we have spent a fair amount of time trying to look at their processes, understand the issues. There is more information in the attachment to the AIS with some of the different permutations, but I would say they're all roughly similar in the way that they have approached this and in the ordinances that they've passed with some minor changes and variations. So since April, the Housing Policy Board has really spent a great deal of time and energy thinking about the various options and thinking about what would result in the greatest impact for the community. They formed a task team that's composed of the at-large and ex officio members of the Housing Policy Board. They've met 8 times over this period. The public comment has been offered at all of the meetings, and they've also conducted specific outreach to the Chamber, home builders, realtors, the Rental Owners Association, the Human Rights Commission, and other interested parties that have expressed some interest along the way. We've also received presentations from Portland and Corvallis staff to really try to better understand their programs and the decisions that they made in that process. And as a result, HPB has created a set of 4 recommendations for council consideration. So the 4 recommendations are in the areas of revenue and targeted population, exemptions, use of proceeds, and then the process for making the funds available. Looking at the recommended rate, HPB recommended a 1% rate for all types of construction. And we did do some analysis to look at what this would potentially yield. And so the analysis shows almost $2 million through the commercial CET, and then just over $1 million for the residential CET, bringing us up to $3 million per year. Recognizing the cyclical nature of construction cycles, you know this number would go up and down. So it's certainly not something that you could sort of guarantee would come in on a year-by-year basis. Looking at the income targets, this was an area where there's definitely some variation by jurisdiction in terms of the targeted use of the funds. Generally, what most are doing is that in the ordinance, they're kind of setting parameters for the focus and then establishing a process for how the resources would be allocated and assigned to projects on an annual basis, because you really won't know year by year how much you will have to work with. But the income targets that the Housing Policy Board focused on for rental units up to 80% of area median income, with an emphasis on 60% of area median income and below, and for homeownership up to 100% of area median income with an emphasis on 80% of area median income and below. And part of this is recognizing the deeper that you are trying to reach with the affordability levels, the greater the subsidy that is needed for the particular project. For projects at that higher end, a smaller or shallower level of subsidy would really help the project happen, but it doesn't need to be as significant. Looking at our area median incomes, hopefully this kind of gives you a sense of what people earn and how it falls within the income ranges at 60, 80, and 100% of area median income.
Is that Eugene or Lincoln?
That is for Lane County. And so the statistical area created by HUD actually covers the county as a whole. The second area is exemptions, and so there are a number of statutory exemptions that are built into the legislation. HPB does recommend an additional exemption for developments in Eugene that receive an affordable housing system development charge exemption, and that could be rental or homeownership projects. The third recommendation is recommended use of revenue, and really they have focused on expanding and preserving the current supply of affordable housing, really in recognition of the significant need for additional units at the lowest end. I have seen many projects over time that are very good projects, but for some reason do not meet one or more of the HUD requirements that we've simply had to say, sorry, we can't help you fill this gap and enable a project to move forward. And also the idea is that the all CET revenue would be deposited into a specific fund and directed to affordable housing and implementation costs. We do a lot of types of support for affordable housing now using the federal funds. So we do gap financing, land acquisition, we support acquisition of existing housing, and we do it for permanent transitional housing, mobile home parks, even tiny homes. So we would expect to see the sort of full range of projects for this funding use in the future. It's important to think a little bit about impact. The typical affordable housing project uses multiple sources of financing. They're typically looking to the local government to provide that subsidy gap, which leverages equity and debt from a variety of private and public sources. We did an analysis of projects over the past 3 years and found that we actually have a leveraging ratio of 5.5 to 1 for the monies that the city has put into this project. Looking at the recommended process, the Housing Policy Board has been working with affordable housing for a very long time, was actually formed through a collaboration of public sector and private sector members of the community to figure out how to develop affordable housing in our community. And so they would continue to provide oversight for the Housing Trust Fund, monitor and evaluate the fund, provide guidance on the RFP process, and appoint the project selection committee for the RFP. And then we would have a project selection committee. What we do for our HUD funds is we have a project selection committee that includes people with real estate development expertise. We include neighborhood representatives. And it's a process that we've done many times so that we really have figured out how to refine it over time to really try to support the best projects and create something that is transparent for the community. Of course, all final decisions would be made by Eugene City Council, just as we do with the federal funds. So proposed next steps, staff can continue to do outreach to interested parties and return to council with a recommendation within 90 days. Housing Policy Board members are also continuing to do outreach to community members and really looking for ways to engage them in this conversation. And this is a role they've played with other housing policy issues like the rental housing code. About 10 years ago, we had a manufactured home park closure ordinance where they played a significant role in trying to forge a compromise approach to doing that as well. So any questions?
Great. Thank you very much, and thanks to the Housing Policy Board for their work on this, which is really excellent and helps us kind of move the conversation forward. I have 4, now 5 people in the queue. Mike, Betty, Claire, Chris, and then Alan.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate this presentation, I guess. As you mentioned at the end there, it's up to the council on steps moving forward, use of some of the manners and choices of this. But it doesn't seem as though we have a choice at council whether or not it's a good idea to do this. We should implement this because we can immediately is what I'm hearing based on recommendation, or is that the manager's choice to just do already?
Not the choice to do by me. What we're recommending is that we go out, do some additional outreach as we talked about here, and then come back with a recommendation to council, not unlike we do with any particular policy issue.
Forgive me, but I didn't hear anything in that entire presentation that said what the downside might be of doing it. That entire presentation was about why this is a good thing that we absolutely should do right away.
Right, so what you saw here is primarily a recommendation from the Housing Policy Board. This is not our full recommendation as a staff, and so part of what we do on these kinds of things is try to take a full picture of any particular policy recommendation we might come back to with this council.
Okay, there's a couple of pieces then that when it comes to our decision, I think it would be good for us to actually know. For example, for every 1% that we add to residential housing in the form of this tax to the permit, how many people do we make housing unaffordable for? How many new people are now priced out of buying a home? What's the economic effect to the marketplace when we have a new cost that affects all housing levels, and when we add multiple percentage beyond 1 because there's no cap on commercial to new apartment complexes of size, which, by the way, it's more than 50% of where people in this community live, that we add a significant cost increase to housing, how many new people will be put out of or may have housing made unaffordable for them, and what's the net difference between those number we can help with the subsidy and the number we are pricing out of housing? And is it a net positive or a net negative? Because that economic analysis should be fairly easy to do. We've done a pretty deep dive with some of this. But I think it's an analysis we should really look at and ask ourselves if we're creating a net positive by implementing a new tax on housing in this community.
Betty.
Thank you. And thank you, Stephanie, for identifying yourself at the beginning. I know who you are, but it's good, I think, for the public and for new people on the council to know who's talking to us. My questions, does it have to be subsidized housing that we use the money for?
Well, I think if you are providing some kind of incentive, by definition, it is a subsidy. And so that subsidy can be provided in a variety of different ways. But I think the use of any dollar actually creates a subsidy. Now you can say, and it's really up to the council to decide how to define housing and decide the income levels that you're targeting, also in terms of what are the required rents. And so a lot of times when we kind of step into these conversations, we have to kind of break down how people define affordable housing, because there's several different elements to it. And so help me to sort of maybe better understand what you are thinking about.
Well, I was thinking of housing projects. I'm thinking, can it be used to help people who are in danger of losing their house? And
in terms of foreclosure assistance or repair assistance?
Can't pay their utility bills, for example.
Yes, yeah.
There are lots of people that can't pay their taxes one year. They can't pay the utility bills pile up, and the penalties for late payment pile up, and that sort of thing, keeping people in houses. Yeah, okay. And how about for homeless shelters? Could it be used for that?
So there is pretty broad ability for the council to define housing. We would need to work with the attorneys on what the sidebars around that. Under the commercial CET, there is that 48% that really is flexible dollars. There are no limitations on that.
Well, I'm in favor of doing something with this, and I think the fact that so many cities have done it indicate that a lot of people think it's a good idea. But the solutions make a difference. What ways we use it, and I like it that you said the final solution is for the council, but the council needs time. Too often, I think the CDBG projects have come to us with no time to spare, no time to think about it. And I know somebody thought about it before, but by the time the council gets it, it's make up your mind now. And anything of this sort, I think we should have time that we know what's being proposed, and then plenty of time to think about it and consider alternatives before we have to decide. But generally, I'm in favor of doing something. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Claire?
Thank you. Well, I look forward to seeing a fuller recommendation with some of the both pros and maybe some of the potential cons. I had the chance to sit down with Norton Cable of the Housing Policy Board to talk about this proposal, so I had a little background before I sat at the table today. So I think it's something we should look further into. I hope it's something we'll agree to pursue. I think in terms of flexibility, unlike a federal grant or a state grant, it gives us, the city council, a lot of flexibility in terms of where would we want to see those dollars placed and where do we think they're going to make the most impact. I do wonder if Ben's experience, since they were the only city that got to implement and just have it run for almost 10 years, might help, if there's an analysis that could be done there that might help answer some of the questions that Councilor Clark asked in terms of was there a balance effect on the other side, because I think that's an important question for us to scrutinize. But overall, I think it's policy that has a lot of validity. I think we'll find that we want to add it to, our array of options we have for figuring out how we kind of not only create affordable housing, but also this can move us towards that missing middle housing conversation that we've been talking about and have had people come to us asking us to work on. So thank you.
Can we have a motion to extend by 5 minutes?
Motion to extend 5 minutes.
Second.
All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Great, thank you. All right. Now we're on to Chris.
Thank you. Really good presentation, and I think a lot of good questions raised. The recommendation from the Housing Policy Board, I think, is the opening recommendation, and as was mentioned, this is the starting point for the conversation. And I think their recommendation was based on a lot of thoughtful study, not only what other communities have done, but what the potential might be. But there are still questions there. In fact, there have been a number of folks who have come to say, I'm just new getting into this process. I have some thoughts on this. I'd like to be involved. And so what the Housing Policy Board wants to do is to continue to refine, as Stephanie pointed out, refine these recommendations. Because it's not just a matter of what we want to do, but how we plan to do it. And I think a lot of the concern I hear, or the questions I hear from folks, are not necessarily, gee, we shouldn't have this, but, well, if you do have it, how are you going to implement it? How are you going to put it in a way that works well and is effective for us? And I think those are legitimate questions. And so we want to make sure we have as complete and inclusive an opportunity to talk about how we would do it so that people can be more comfortable with what it is we're proposing to do. So I fully understand that. And I think we want to take the time necessary in order to be able to have an inclusive and complete process of saying, here's some more information about how it could be used, how it could benefit, how it could result. Are there any downsides? If so, what are they? And could they be mitigated? And so, yeah, it's going to take a little more time to do that. But I encourage the council to say this is a topic that is worth continuing to explore and talk about, because I think there is some potential for merit here if it's done properly. So I'm pleased with the progress we've made so far. I think there's still a lot more good things we can do and some other voices we can hear from. But I think so far I'm very encouraged.
Good. Great. Alan.
Yeah, thanks to the Housing Policy Board, Chris, which you sit on, for developing this recommendation with very good details, saying it's a great place to start. Looking at this gives us something to shoot at, so to speak. I guess 8 jurisdictions have done this. Bend was first, and then there's Portland, Corvallis, Canyon Beach, Hood River, City and County, Port and Milwaukee. So 8 jurisdictions already have done this. The recommendation straw poll so far, 1% across the board would create $3 million a year, and we would put that into the Housing Trust Fund. That doesn't currently exist, the Housing Trust Fund.
So over time, the city has had some little bits and pieces of funding over time, and so it really is just a separate budgetary line item, and so it's what local jurisdictions call whatever the mechanism is that they've created and how they're funding particular projects.
Segregated and used for that.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. Can you explain the pie charts on of the allocations of how it gets spent? Went over that really quickly.
Yes. Let's go back to that. So for the residential CET, the legislation specifies this distribution of funding. And so as I mentioned, the local affordable housing incentives at 50%. If a jurisdiction does adopt inclusionary zoning, that money must be reserved for incentives for those developments that have IZ requirements. And that is also part of the legislation that if you adopt IZ, you have to provide incentives in some way, shape, or form to those developments. The 31%, is very flexible for affordable housing, whether or not you adopt IZ. That can be used in that way. Yes. And so if you don't adopt IZ, both of those segments can be used for affordable housing in whatever way is defined by the local jurisdiction. And then the homeownership programs, it is an amount of money that is required to be submitted to the state. They fund a variety of homeownership development and down payment assistance programs. They've committed those resources would come back to Eugene and other jurisdictions that have adopted.
Was that intended to handle kind of what Mike was talking about, the impacts of increasing the cost? So therefore, some of the money goes back into people who can't afford homes and comes back to Eugene.
Yeah, I mean, and generally what we have seen with our homeownership and down payment assistance programs, folks really are not able to afford the newest units in the market. They're purchasing older units, and so definitely it will help with that. And also, more and more, we're actually turning to trying to find ways to actually develop affordable homeownership units. Because they're very difficult to find on the market right now.
Just new construction, or would remodels be in the CET as well?
So if there is an expansion of living space, and so if it's just you're replacing your roof, no. Or if you're building an accessory building that's not for living space, that would not be subject to this.
Adding a living room, remodeling your garage into a space, then it would be.
I believe so. I'd have to look at the specifics to see what would fall in or out of that.
Can you relate this to the upcoming missing middle housing conversation that we're going to have, and how those two things tail?
And I would definitely say that there is in the Housing Policy Board discussions, and I think it's reflected in the recommendation for the income levels, is a recognition that, when we're looking at rentals, there are people that are above the sort of traditional level of 60% area median income that are having trouble finding housing in the community. And then for homeownership, really the level up to 100% of area median income, I think, is meant to reflect that. I'm in some discussions with planning staff about missing middle and definitely aware of those conversations. And I know that council is still kind of figuring out how to talk about those issues moving forward.
Yeah. So I like the idea of the next steps of doing more outreach and refining this recommendation. That makes sense.
Yeah. Emily?
Thank you very much. I approve. I like all the work you've done. I look forward to going forward this and using it for housing. I'm going to sneak in an issue of concern and say thank you to Councilors Zelenka and Clark for their hard work and service as officers of the council this year. And I would like to wish the entire city very happy holidays.
Oh. Thank you. Thank you. And I just want to second that. Thank you all. It's been quite an interesting and exciting and informative year 2017. Thank you, Alan, for being by my side as council president all year. I look forward to having Mike switch seats next year, and I think Betty will join us vice chair. So thank you all, and have a wonderful break. Have a wonderful holiday. Safe travels if you're traveling. See you next year. Thank you.
That'll be fun, Betty. That'll be